At the northerly edge of County Donegal Island, the Fanad Peninsula tapers to a knuckle of rock where the North Atlantic heaves into the narrow mouth of Lough Swilly. Fanad Head Lighthouse, white tower, red gallery, low-roofed keepers' houses, huddled like sheep against the gale, stands guard on that point. It is one of those rare lights whose beauty is inseparable from the drama of its purpose: to pull ships safely past reefs and tide rips into a lough that is more like a long glacial fjord than an ordinary bay. The geography matters. Fannad Head faces two ways at once: outward to the Atlantic and inward toward Lough Swilly, and that dual orientation shaped its optics, its operations, and its story. Today, the lighthouse is among Ireland's most photographed beacons, and, since its public opening in the 2010s, a place where travellers can climb the tower, sleep in former keepers' quarters, and listen to the wind batter the doors as it did for generations of families who lived by the clock of the lantern. But the light's origin is written in loss. In the winter of 1811, a Royal Navy frigate shattered on Fannad's rocks, and the Atlantic wrote a line so stark that Parliament, engineers, and the commissioners of Irish Lights could not ignore it. Lough Swilly cuts deep into Donegal between the Fanad and Inishowen peninsulas. It is a long, sheltered waterway that offered historic anchorage to navies and later merchant ships and liners seeking refuge from gales. Its approaches, however, are complex. Submerged rocks, like Swilly Rock, lie in the fairway. Tide and swell refract around the headlands. Winter snow squalls can drop visibility to nothing in minutes. Ships needed a conspicuous mark at precisely the place where judgment must be made, to stand out to sea or to run in for shelter. This is why Fannad Head became such an obvious site for a light. A tower here could do double duty, show one character to the ocean and another to the lough, guiding vessels that were threading the needle between the headlands. That dual character would be written into Fannad's earliest optical arrangement: red to the Atlantic, white to the lough, so that mariners could tell at a glance whether they were on the right water. The event that hurried Fannad from proposal to reality was the wreck of HMS Saldanha, a 36-gun frigate serving on the Irish station during the Napoleonic Wars. On the night of December 4th, 1811, Saldanha laboured in a northerly gale with driving snow while patrolling with the sloop Talbot. Attempting to regain the anchorage in Lough Swilly, she likely struck the submerged Swilly Rock and was then driven into Ballymastoker, Ballynastoker Bay. By morning, the broken hull was found near the shore. Of the roughly 250 souls aboard, including the young Captain William Pakenham, none survived to tell the tale. Local reports spoke of bodies washing ashore by the hundreds. In the lore that followed, two creatures were said to have survived: the ship's dog and a green parrot that wore a collar engraved Captain Pakenham, the parrot later shot by a servant months afterward, a melancholy epilogue that stuck in local memory like a burr. The scale and horror of the loss reverberated through the Admiralty, into newspapers and across the island. Within months, a lighthouse at Fanad Head was no longer an item on an engineer's wish list, but a public necessity. The commissioners of Irish Lights, guided by the prolific engineer George Halpin, whose portfolio would come to define much of Ireland's 19th century lighthouse architecture, were tasked with building a conspicuous beacon at the very margin where Saldanha had tried to find safety and failed. Halpin's solution was characteristically elegant and practical: a masonry tower rising from a compact station of keepers' dwellings and ancillary buildings walled tight against the wind. What made Fannad distinctive, beyond its placement, was its optical plan. When first lit on March 17th, 1817, St. Patrick's Day, the lantern's fixed light showed red seaward and white toward the lough, visible in clear weather for roughly 14 miles. The date mattered to the public imagination, a national feast day, and the dual colour was a functional signature mariners would learn by rote. Fanad's first light was oil, sperm oil wick lamps with polished reflectors, a standard arrangement in the pre-Fresnel age. The first decade saw incremental improvements, as at many Irish lights, better burners, refinements in the character of the light, the rhythm and colour that identify a station, and the continual war with salt, rust and storm. Fanad's headland, battered by gales roaring down from the Arctic routes, forced constant maintenance to masonry and glazing. Keepers learned the topography of noise, the way sailors learned the sea. The whistle in the sash before a sou'wester, the rattle of loose slate before a nor'east squall, the different timbres of surf when the swell shifted. By the later 19th century, with steam replacing sail and traffic increasing into Derry and across the North Atlantic, a taller, more powerful presentation from the Atlantic side was investigated. Ireland's lighthouse service, like its British counterpart, was perpetually balancing budgets and need, but Fanad remained a priority station given its strategic location at the Lough's throat. Period notes and enthusiasts' histories point to ongoing discussions about raising the tower and improving the optic for Atlantic visibility. Before automation, a lighthouse was not just a machine, but a small community. At Fanad, 3 families typically kept the station, a principal keeper and 2 assistant keepers. The domestic rhythms were regulated by the light's demands. In the oil era, keepers rose early to trim, polish and refill. All night they kept watch, logging weather, ships and any failures of the mechanism. Everything, brass, glass, steps, was kept immaculate. The lamp room was the sanctum, polished metal, the pleasant ghostly smell of oil, the sound of wind humming against the glazing like a long-held note. Children grew up with cliff edges and roaring weather as their normal. Wives kept homes that needed to be ready for provisioning once a month, and occasionally for visitors sheltering from sudden weather. Fanad's isolation, mitigated by the closeness of Portsalon and Rathmullen across the Lough, could at times feel cocooning, at times severe. But for many keeper families, the shared work and grandeur of place outweighed the privations. Fanad Head's light could not prevent every tragedy. On January 25th, 1917, the White Star Line's SS Laurentic, serving as an armed merchant cruiser, left Lough Swilly after an unscheduled stop to land sick crew. Laden with 3,211 bars of gold, payment for wartime munitions, she struck 2 German mines just beyond the Lough's mouth, north of Fanad Head, and sank in less than an hour. Although the crew abandoned ship, the night was bitterly cold. Hypothermia killed many in the boats before rescue. Of the roughly 475 aboard, 354 died. Over the next years, the Royal Navy undertook one of the most famous salvage operations in maritime history, recovering the vast majority of the gold in arduous, dangerous dives. The wreck, broken and scattered by a century of weather and salvage, lies between Fannad and Fannad Head. It is protected today as a historic site. Commemorations in 2017 marked the centenary, reminding local communities how close and recent the sea's costs can feel. Beyond headline losses, Fanad's waters have seen countless smaller dramas, fishing boats disabled in winter seas, pleasure craft capsized, rescues coordinated by the RNLI stations at Lough Swilly, Arranmore and Portrush. In December 2019, for example, 5 crab fishermen 20 miles north of Fanad Head were brought off a crippled vessel in heavy weather by a coordinated 3-station RNLI response, later recognised with awards. Such episodes form a continuous thread of risk, response and seamanship, in which the lighthouse is both a symbol and a literal point of reference in the dark. With automation came an opportunity to reinterpret Fanad for the public. In the mid-2010s, the site opened for tours, exhibits, and overnight stays in the former keepers' houses. The experience is something like time travel. Thick walls, low windows, a stove, the hiss of wind. Then the climb into the lantern and the sudden revelation of sea and lough from a vantage keepers knew better than anyone. The operation offers guided visits, coastal walks, and self-catering accommodation, sustainably reusing heritage buildings as part of Ireland's broader lighthouse tourism initiative. The Lighthouse's own organisation and Great Lighthouses of Ireland promote Fanad as both historical site and Wild Atlantic Way landmark. Fanad's tower is proportioned in the restrained idiom that Halpin favoured: functional, modestly ornamented, and eminently maintainable. The compound's whitewash is not merely aesthetic, but practical. It protects masonry and boosts conspicuity in daylight. Over time, weatherproofing evolved. Modern membranes under slate, improved glazing, lightning protection, each change tacked onto the original Halpin bones with care. From the first oil and reflector arrangement, Fanad migrated into the Fresnel era, then to electric lamps and modern optics. While enthusiasts love the language of orders, first order, second order lenses, etc., the practical story for mariners is simpler: better light, better reliability, clearer signature. Fanad's red and white logic, red to the ocean, white toward the lough, speaks to the station's rare two-front role. Fog signals at many Irish stations changed across the 20th century. Explosive signals, diaphones, then electric horns, always a compromise between audibility, power, and the way sound bends and vanishes in fog. Fanad, perched above broken water, would have felt the fog signal's thump in the sternum. Keepers' diaries from analogous stations speak of that deep, repetitive companionship on nights when the light itself could be swallowed whole by mist. The record shows that the Saldanha catastrophe spurred Fanad's construction and that the Laurentic disaster unfolded within sight of its beam. But the headland's tragic ledger is longer. Small craft gone down in squalls, men lost overboard, bodies recovered on the strand, names etched into parish stones. Newspapers from the 19th and early 20th centuries frequently printed marine intelligence notices for Lough Swilly. Ships detained in weather, a vessel seen heaving to under the head, a boat missing between Rathmullen and Portsalon. Not all such stories end in loss. In modern times, multiple dramatic rescues off Fanad, 2012, 2018, 2019, 2023, underline the ongoing peril of these waters and the continuing, living purpose of a lighthouse that is no museum piece when wind, swell and tide conspire against a small hull. Is Fanad Head Lighthouse haunted? Unlike some beacons that have accumulated a dense web of specific ghost stories, apparitions of named keepers, catalogued footsteps on a certain landing, Fanad's paranormal file is comparatively slim. That said, this stretch of coast has a rich supernatural vernacular, and the lighthouse's own narrative is often braided with the most famous local tragedy, the Saldanha. Around Halloween in recent years, heritage events at the station have invited visitors to meet the ghosts of the Saldanha, a form of place-based storytelling that leans into the way grief and danger adhere to a landscape. Beyond the lighthouse proper, Fanad District Folklore includes multiple ghost narratives. The Irish National Folklore Collection, Dúchas, preserves a Fanad ghost tale. Chairs sliding away from sitters, eggs chirping from cups in uncanny mimicry of life, rooted in an 18th to 19th century curse narrative. The Dublin Review of Books has discussed an even earlier 1786 Fanad haunting that set local nerves on edge with knockings and poltergeist-like disturbances. These aren't lighthouse stories, strictly speaking, but they tell us about a cultural climate in which the wind at windows, the booming of surf, and the intermittent flash of a light in fog are easily given personalities, motives, and warnings. That sensibility, call it a readiness to hear the coast speak, often follows visitors up the tower stairs after dusk. Maritime ghost lore also gathers around the Saldanha itself, the collar-wearing parrot whose afterlife in local anecdote is stranger than fiction, the phantom shiplights said to be glimpsed in snow squalls, the human tendency, after disaster, to populate a place with presences. While historians rightly caution against taking folklore as fact, heritage custodians recognise that such stories are part of how communities metabolize loss and teach risk to the next generation. In that sense, ghost stories at Fanad are not merely spooky garnish, they are mnemonic devices for danger. Visitors who step through Fanad's gate now enter a carefully interpreted space. Exhibits trace the Saldanha disaster and Halpin's design. Guides describe life before automation, and the climb into the lantern culminates in a view that synthesizes the station's whole reason for being. To the east lies Lough Swilly, broad as a river estuary, where squadrons once rode to their anchors. To the west and north is the ocean, dark blue in summer, iron in winter, tearing past outcrops that gleam and vanish under combers. On shore, low ruins and field lines speak of older human tenure. A mile inland, townlands with names that announce the hill or the hollow. If there is a ghost here, it is the ghost of work well done. The memory of people who trimmed wicks, replaced panes, carried fuel in sleet, recorded wind shifts in careful script, and hovered over the smallest brass and glass detail, because those details mattered to someone out there in the dark. At night, the modern optic throws its coded pulse into the sea lanes. From a trawler north of the head or a small rib crossing the Lough, Fanad's wink appears with the dependable cadence that has stitched this coast to the wider world for more than 2 centuries. Does Fanad have a resident ghost? The most responsible answer is that its immediate folklore is more atmospheric than specific. Local heritage programming has used the Saldanha dead as a seasonal lens for storytelling, and the wider Fanad district has robust ghost lore preserved by the Duchess School's collection and literary essays, poltergeist-like disturbances, curses fulfilled with uncanny domestic mischief, but rigorous, named, lighthouse-specific hauntings are sparse here. That scarcity is itself instructive. Fanad's eeriness comes not from a single well-attested apparition, but from a palimpsest of loss and rescue, a wreck with no survivors, a midwinter liner sinking, countless small dramas, and a tower that has kept steady watch through them all. When interpreters tell ghost stories at Fanad, the ethical task is to honour the dead and the work. In practice, that means using folklore to awaken attention, to get a modern visitor to imagine what it was like to stand in the lantern in a snow squall, listening for a gunshot of surf that might be a ship breaking, and then to connect that imaginative attention back to real names, dates, and practices. Done well, such storytelling doesn't sensationalize. It sharpens the outline of the truth. Walk out of the tower after sunset. The air is iodined and cold. Out past the reefs, a dark swell lifts and lowers like a chest breathing. Far to the north, a trawler's worklight swings. To the east, the Lough is a black ribbon with 1 or 2 domestic lights along its margins. Inside the lantern, a modern lamp hums. The flash moves out across water, finds the trawler's wheelhouse windows, paints the cliff faces, touches the Lough like a finger, and is gone. Then it returns. This has been Fanad's deed since 1817, to keep a cadence for mariners and for the shorebound who listen for it. Long after keepers left, and long after the last salvage diver came up from the Laurentic, the headland still speaks in time. Light, dark, light, and the sea replies.